His concept was very basic. His concept was play 1874 in 1974.
It came out on February 7th, 1974, made on a budget of $2.6 million, and finished the year as the highest-grossing film in the country. 52 years later, people are still quoting it. But what happened to the cast that made it immortal? And who among them is still with us today? Cast member 10. Cleavon Little, Sheriff Bart. When Blazing Saddles went into production, the role of Sheriff Bart was written with Richard Pryor in mind. Pryor had co-written the screenplay alongside Mel Brooks, Andrew Bergman, Norman Steinberg, and Alan Euger, and the character was shaped in large part by Pryor's voice and sensibility. But the role ultimately went to Cleavon Little instead, a decision that turned out to be exactly right. It was, as it turned out, exactly the right decision. Cleavon Jake Little was born on June 1, 1939, in Chickasha, Oklahoma, and raised in San Diego, California, where he attended Kearney High School. He earned a degree in speech therapy from San Diego State College in 1965, won a scholarship from the American Broadcasting Company to attend the American Academy of Dramatic Arts in New York, and was named the best actor in his graduating class of 1967. From the beginning, he operated in two worlds simultaneously, the classical stage and the rough and tumble of television and film, and he was genuinely at home in both. He had a precision about him that was rare. Every line landed where he intended it to. Every pause carried weight. His breakthrough on stage came in 1970 when he starred in Pearlie, Ossie Davis's Broadway musical, opposite Melba Moore. The performance earned him both a Tony Award for Best Actor in a Musical and a Drama Desk Award, and established him as one of the most promising young theatrical talents in New York, at a moment when Broadway was hungry for exactly that kind of presence. His first major television role came in 1972 with the ABC sitcom Temperatures Rising, where he played Dr. Jerry Noland, sharp, irreverent, and impossible to ignore. His performance as Sheriff Bart, navigating a town full of people who despised him with more intelligence and wit than any of them could muster, is one of the most effortlessly charming lead performances in American film comedy. He received a BAFTA Award nomination for Most Promising Newcomer to Leading Film Roles for the role. The studio had been cautious. The audiences were not. The film made $119 million domestically, and Little was at the center of it. After Blazing Saddles, Little continued working steadily across stage, film, and television. He appeared on Broadway in the original productions of All Over Town, 1975, directed by Dustin Hoffman, and The Poison Tree, 1976. His most celebrated post-Blazing Saddles stage work came with I'm Not Rappaport, 1985-86, Herb Gardner's play about two old men in Central Park, where he co-starred with Judd Hirsch to Tony-nominated performances from both. When Hirsch won the Tony Award for the production in 1986, he called Little to the stage to share the moment, a gesture that said everything about the friendship between them. In 1989, Little won a Primetime Emmy Award for a guest appearance on the NBC sitcom Dear John. He starred in the television adaptations of Baghdad Cafe alongside Whoopi Goldberg and Gene Stapleton, and True Colors, 1990-1992 on Fox. His last film role was Going to Chicago, 1991, and his final screen appearance was a guest role in a 1992 episode of Tales from the Crypt. Cleavon Little died of colon cancer on October 22, 1992, at his home in Sherman Oaks, California. He was 53 years old. His ashes were scattered into the Pacific Ocean. In 1994, he was posthumously honored with a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame on the south side of Hollywood Boulevard. The Cleavon Little Scholarship, providing assistance to minority students, was established at the American Academy of Dramatic Arts through a campaign led by his close friend, Judd Hirsch. Sidney Poitier delivered his eulogy, calling him a shining example of what was possible. Cast member 9, Gene Wilder, Jim, the Waco Kid. Gene Wilder was not the first choice for the Waco Kid. Dan Daly had been cast, then dropped out. Gig Young replaced him, but Young's severe alcoholism made it impossible for him to function on set, and he was replaced after a single day of filming. He collapsed during his first scene from what was later determined to be alcohol withdrawal syndrome. Mel Brooks called Wilder, who was already deep into writing Young Frankenstein. Wilder agreed to step in, on one condition, that Brooks would immediately commit to directing Young Frankenstein right after. Brooks agreed. Wilder shot all his Blazing Saddles scenes and walked directly into Young Frankenstein. Both films were released in 1974, and both became landmarks of American film comedy in the same calendar year. Gene Wilder was born Jerome Silberman on June 11, 1933 in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. As a child, he began making his mother laugh after a doctor warned the 8-year-old Jerome that stress was dangerous to her heart condition. He later credited that directive, make her laugh, keep her calm, as the origin of his entire career. He studied at the University of Iowa, then at the Bristol Old Vic Theatre School in England, and trained at the Actors Studio in New York under Lee Strasberg. His Broadway debut came in 1961 in The Complacent Lover, and a small role in Bonnie and Clyde, 1967, launched his film career the same year he starred opposite Zero Mostel in The Producers, earning him an Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actor. Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, 1971, followed, and Wilder's portrayal of the eccentric chocolatier, tender and quietly menacing in the same breath, became one of the most enduring characterizations in American popular culture. It is the role most people think of first, even now, more than 50 years later. His partnership with Richard Pryor produced 4 films: Silver Streak, 1976, Stir Crazy, 1980, See No Evil, Hear No Evil, 1989, and Another You, 1991. Stir Crazy alone grossed over $100 million on initial release, enormous business for 1980. He also wrote and directed several of his own films, including The Adventure of Sherlock Holmes's Smarter Brother, 1975, and The Woman in Red, 1984. In 1984, Wilder married Gilda Radner, the Saturday Night Live comedian he had met on the set of Hanky Panky, 1982. It was his 3rd marriage. Radner was diagnosed with ovarian cancer in 1986 and died on May 20th, 1989. After her death, Wilder became a prominent advocate for ovarian cancer awareness and co-founded Gilda's Club, named in her honor, as a support community for cancer patients and their families across the country. He married Karen Boyer, a speech pathologist he had met during Radner's illness in 1991. They remained together for the rest of his life. His last acting credit was a guest role on Will and Grace in 2002 and 2003, for which he won a Primetime Emmy Award for Outstanding Guest Actor in a Comedy Series. He then stepped away from performing entirely and devoted himself to writing a memoir, Kiss Me Like a Stranger, 2005, and 3 novels. In 2013, he was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease, a diagnosis he kept private because, as his nephew Jordan Walker Perlman later explained, he could not bear the thought of children who knew him as Willy Wonka associating that character with illness and decline. Gene Wilder died on August 29, 2016, at his home in Stamford, Connecticut. He was 83. Mel Brooks called him one of the truly great talents of our time. He blessed every film we did with his magic, and he blessed me with his friendship. Cast member 8, Madeline Kahn, Lili von Shtupp. Madeline Kahn's performance as Lili von Shtupp earned her an Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actress, the 2nd consecutive year she had received that nomination. The year before, she had been nominated for Paper Moon, 1973. Both performances were in Mel Brooks productions. Both nominations came within 12 months of each other, and both displayed something rare. A performer who was technically flawless and genuinely, unstoppably funny at the same time. Born Madeline Gale Wolfson on September 29, 1942, in Boston, Massachusetts, Kahn grew up in New York after her parents divorced when she was 2. She took the surname Kahn from her stepfather, who formally adopted her. She attended Hofstra University on a drama scholarship and trained seriously as an opera singer, a background that informed everything she did on screen. When a role required singing, she could be both comedically perfect and vocally brilliant simultaneously. That combination was unusual enough to be extraordinary. Her film debut was in Peter Bogdanovich's What's Up, Doc, 1972, opposite Barbra Streisand and Ryan O'Neal, and she made an immediate impression. Paper Moon followed in 1973, earning her first Oscar nomination for playing Trixie Delight, a carnival entertainer with a warm heart and a keen awareness of her own limitations. Her Lili von Shtupp, a clear and affectionate parody of Marlene Dietrich's performance in Destry Rides Again, 1939, was a showcase for her operatic training, her physical comedy, and a timing so precise that a single misplaced consonant became funnier than a page of written jokes. She understood exactly what Brooks was doing with the character, and she played every note of it with both the voice of a trained singer and the instincts of a born comedian. She and Mel Brooks collaborated 5 times. Blazing Saddles, Young Frankenstein, 1974, High Anxiety, 1977, History of the World, Part 1, 1981, and Mixed Nuts. In Young Frankenstein, she played Elizabeth, Frederick Frankenstein's imperious fiancée, and transformed a relatively small role into one of the film's most quoted performances through sheer comic specificity. She also appeared in Clue, 1985, The Muppet Movie, 1979, and was a beloved presence on Sesame Street across multiple decades, bringing her warmth and versatility to an audience of children who had no idea they were watching one of the most technically accomplished comic performers of her generation. On stage, she received 4 Tony Award nominations and won the Tony for Best Actress in a Play in 1993 for Wendy Wasserstein's The Sisters Rosenzweig, a role that showed a depth and emotional range her film work had only partially captured. It is one of the performances most often cited by people who knew her work well as a sign of what else she might have done had she lived longer. Her final regular television role was Pauline Fox in 84 episodes of the CBS sitcom Cosby, 1996 to 1999. She voiced Gypsy the Moth in Pixar's A Bug's Life, 1998, in one of her final film credits. In September 1998, Kahn was diagnosed with ovarian cancer. She continued working through treatment, keeping the diagnosis largely private. She married John Hansberry in October 1999. 6 weeks later, on December 3, 1999, Madeline Kahn died in New York City. She was 57. A memorial bench was dedicated to her in Central Park by her husband and her brother Jeffrey. Cast member 7, Harvey Korman, Hedley Lamarr. Harvey Korman was, by 1974, one of the most familiar faces on American television. A cast member of The Carol Burnett Show since its first season in 1967, he won 4 Primetime Emmy Awards and a Golden Globe for his work on that show, and his recurring comic partnerships with Tim Conway produced some of the most celebrated sketch comedy in television history. The dynamic between them was well understood by anyone who watched regularly. Conway would find something unexpected to do, an accent, a piece of physical business, a line reading nobody had rehearsed, and Korman would begin to lose it. That helpless, collapsing laughter, barely contained and sometimes not contained at all, became as beloved as the sketches themselves. Harvey Herschel Korman was born on February 15, 1927, in Chicago, to Russian Jewish immigrant parents. He trained at the Goodman School of Drama at the Chicago Art Institute after serving in the U.S. Navy in World War II, spent years struggling to break through in New York theater, and eventually found his way to Hollywood. Before The Carol Burnett Show, he was a regular on The Danny Kaye Show starting in 1964, and provided the voice of the Great Gazoo, the tiny helmet-wearing alien, on The Flintstones during the 1965-66 season. When he joined Carol Burnett's ensemble in 1967, he found exactly the collaborative environment he had been built for. His role as Hedley Lamarr in Blazing Saddles, the scheming, pompous attorney general perpetually exasperated when people call him Hetty, was his most memorable film performance. Mel Brooks cast him partly on the recommendation of his wife Anne Bancroft, who had seen Korman on The Burnett Show and pointed him out. The character's full-throttle villainy, Korman's gift for comic indignation, and his spectacular reaction shots when things go sideways made Hedley Lamarr one of the film's defining presences. He went on to appear in 4 Mel Brooks films total, including High Anxiety, 1977, and History of the World, Part 1, 1981. He also appeared in the Star Wars Holiday Special, 1978, an event in television history best described as extraordinary, playing 3 characters including a 4-armed cooking instructor named Chef Gourmanda. After leaving The Carol Burnett Show in 1977 to pursue his own projects, Korman was honest about what he discovered. That particular chemistry was impossible to replicate elsewhere. His own series, The Harvey Korman Show, 1978, failed quickly. But he reunited with Tim Conway for touring stage shows well into their 70s, performing 6 or 8 shows in a single weekend, still finding ways to make each other laugh the way they always had. Korman suffered a ruptured abdominal aortic aneurysm in early 2008 and underwent several major surgeries over the following months. Harvey Korman died on May 29, 2008 at UCLA Medical Center. He was 81. He is entombed at Woodlawn Cemetery in Santa Monica, California. Mel Brooks said, "It was very dangerous for me to work with him. If our eyes met, we'd crash to the floor in comic ecstasy. It was comedy heaven to make Harvey Korman laugh." Cast member 6, Slim Pickens, Taggart. If there was one member of the Blazing Saddles cast who was genuinely the character he was playing, it was Slim Pickens. He spent 20 years working the rodeo circuit as a professional clown and bullfighter before he ever stood in front of a camera, and every role he played in Hollywood came filtered through that foundation. The drawl was real. The hat was his own. The horse he rode was usually his too. Slim Pickens was born Louis Burton Lindley Jr. on June 29, 1919, in Kingsburg, California. He began entering rodeos as a teenager under a false name because his father disapproved. A rodeo manager once told him the prize money would be Slim Pickens, and the nickname stuck for life. He spent roughly 2 decades on the circuit before a chance encounter with director William Keighley at a rodeo led to his screen debut in Rocky Mountain, 1950, starring Errol Flynn. Keighley reportedly told Pickens he had the right face and the right way of moving, and that was enough. His film career was built almost entirely on westerns. He played villains, comic sidekicks, and everything between across dozens of features and television appearances. Bonanza, Hee Haw, The Mary Tyler Moore Show, One-Eyed Jacks, 1961, with Marlon Brando, and Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid, 1973, directed by Sam Peckinpah. He brought an authenticity to the Western genre that no amount of acting training could manufacture, because he had actually lived the life those films were romanticizing. His most iconic moment before Blazing Saddles was as Major T.J. King Kong in Stanley Kubrick's Dr. Strangelove, 1964, where he rode a nuclear bomb toward detonation waving his cowboy hat, one of the most indelible images in the history of film. Kubrick reportedly cast him precisely because he wanted someone who would play the scene completely straight and not signal that anything was meant to be funny. Pickens delivered exactly that. As Taggart in Blazing Saddles, a decade later, he brought the same sun-baked, hollow-eyed commitment to the role of Hedley Lamarr's dim but utterly loyal chief henchman. In 1982, Pickens was inducted into the Western Performers Hall of Fame at the National Cowboy and Western Heritage Museum. His last feature film was Pink Motel, 1982. He was diagnosed with a brain tumor in his final years and underwent surgery in San Francisco. Slim Pickens died on December 8, 1983, in a convalescent hospital in Modesto, California. He was 64. His ashes were scattered in a meadow outside Pinedale, Wyoming, exactly the kind of country he had spent his life riding through. Cast member 5, Alex Karras, Mongo. Alex Karras was one of the most feared defensive linemen in the history of professional football before he ever appeared on screen, and he brought every pound of that reputation with him when he walked onto the Blazing Saddles set. Alexander George Karras was born on July 15, 1935, in Gary, Indiana. His father, a Greek immigrant physician, died when Alex was 11, leaving the family to manage on their own in a rough industrial city during lean years. Karras channeled everything into football. He won a scholarship to the University of Iowa, was runner-up for the 1957 Heisman Trophy, and was drafted by the Detroit Lions with the 10th overall pick in the 1958 NFL Draft. He was the heart of the Lions' defensive line for more than a decade and was described by opposing offensive linemen as effectively unblockable in his prime. His career was interrupted in 1963 when Commissioner Pete Rozelle suspended him for a full season for betting on NFL games, a suspension Karras disputed for the rest of his life, but he returned and remained one of the league's most dominant players until his retirement in 1970. His transition to entertainment had begun during his playing years. He appeared on The Tonight Show, did guest spots on television programs, and developed a comic persona that was the inverse of his on-field reputation, physical and imposing, but also self-deprecating and surprisingly warm. After retiring from football, he joined the broadcast team for ABC's Monday Night Football alongside Howard Cosell and Frank Gifford, serving as a color commentator for 3 seasons from 1974 to 1976. That same year, Blazing Saddles was released. As Mongo, he played a simple-minded but enormous enforcer with a physical and comedic presence that made the character one of the film's most beloved. His delivery, all commitment, zero self-awareness, was perfectly calibrated. The character required a specific kind of performer, someone large enough to be believable as an unstoppable force and funny enough to be the butt of the joke. Karras was both. In the 1980s, Karras starred alongside his real-life wife Susan Clark in the ABC sitcom Webster, 1983 to 1989, playing George Papadopoulos, a retired athlete who becomes the guardian of a young boy named Webster Long. The show began on ABC, ran 6 seasons there, and continued for 2 more seasons in first-run syndication, 8 seasons in total. He and Clark founded Georgian Bay Productions together and produced several television films through the company, including the Webster TV movie reunion specials. In his final years, Karras was diagnosed with dementia, which his family attributed to the repeated head trauma of his football career. He was among thousands of former NFL players who joined lawsuits against the league over its handling of concussion-related injuries. He also battled heart disease and stomach cancer. Alex Karras died on October 10, 2012, at his home in Los Angeles from complications of kidney failure. He was 77. In 2020, he was posthumously inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame, an honor that had been denied him for decades, which many observers believed was directly connected to the 1963 betting suspension. Cast member 4, Dom DeLuise, Buddy Bizarre. Dom DeLuise's role in Blazing Saddles was a cameo. He played Buddy Bizarre, the flamboyant director of a Hollywood musical whose set gets spectacularly crashed by the brawling cast of the Western. But he delivered it with the kind of full-commitment physical energy that made 60 seconds of screen time feel like a complete performance. No reserve, no half measures, pure forward momentum into the comedy. That was always how DeLuise worked. He had one speed: full. Dominic DeLuise was born on August 1, 1933, in Brooklyn, New York, into an Italian-American family that treated food, laughter, and togetherness as essentially the same thing. He trained at the neighborhood Playhouse School of the Theater alongside classmates who would go on to distinguished careers, and built his early television presence as a regular on The Gary Moore Show and The Dean Martin Show in the 1960s. His friendship with Mel Brooks, they first met in the early 1960s and remained genuinely close for the rest of their lives, gave him a recurring home in the Brooks Repertory Company. DeLuise appeared in 7 Brooks films: The 12 Chairs, 1970, Blazing Saddles, 1974, Silent Movie, 1976, History of the World, Part 1, 1981, Spaceballs, 1987, Robin Hood, Men in Tights, 1993, and Dracula, Dead and Loving It, 1995. He was the person on set who never stopped being happy to be there, and everyone around him noticed it. Beyond Brooks, he was a fixture in the Burt Reynolds comedy films of the late 1970s and early 1980s, The End, 1978, The Cannonball Run, 1981, and Cannonball Run 2, 1984. These films existed largely as an excuse for Reynolds and his circle of friends to spend time together on camera and make each other laugh, and DeLuise fit that world as naturally as anyone. He provided the voice of Jeremy the Crow in Don Bluth's The Secret of NIMH, 1982, a gentle, neurotic bird who becomes an unlikely hero, and Tiger the Cat in An American Tail, 1986. He was a gifted voice actor because the warmth he projected on screen translated completely to audio. He also hosted cooking segments on various television programs and wrote several popular cookbooks: Eat This, It'll Make You Feel Better, 1988, and its follow-ups, that were genuine expressions of a love of food and family that ran deep. His 3 sons, all actors, have spoken about growing up in a household where cooking was as important as performing. Dom DeLuise died on May 4, 2009 in Los Angeles from complications of kidney failure following a battle with cancer. He was 75. Mel Brooks said of him, "He was the funniest man I ever knew. He made me laugh harder than anyone on this earth." Cast member 3, Mel Brooks, Governor Lepetamon / Indian Chief / Director. Mel Brooks did not just direct Blazing Saddles. He co-wrote it, played 2 roles in it: the dim-witted Governor William J. Lepetamon and a Yiddish-speaking Sioux chief, and briefly appeared as himself during the film's climactic melee. He made it for $2.6 million, and it grossed $119.5 million in the United States and Canada alone, making it the highest-grossing film of 1974, ahead of The Towering Inferno, Young Frankenstein, and The Godfather Part 2. The American Film Institute later ranked it the 6th greatest comedy in American film history. In 2006, the Library of Congress selected it for preservation in the National Film Registry, calling it culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant. The studio, famously, had tried to talk him out of making the film at all. They screened an early cut and were not entirely sure they had a comedy. They were wrong. Mel Brooks was born Melvin Kaminsky on June 28, 1926, in Brooklyn, New York. He grew up in Williamsburg, the youngest of 4 brothers, and served as a combat engineer in Europe during World War II, an experience he often said gave him a permanent, bone-deep contempt for fascism that ran through his comedy for the rest of his life. Making the most brutal things ridiculous was, for him, not just a comedic strategy, it was a worldview. After the war, he worked as a stand-up comic and social director at resorts in the Catskill Mountains before being hired as a writer for Sid Caesar's Your Show of Shows in the early 1950s. The writer's room of that program has been called the greatest single concentration of comedy writing talent in television history. Alongside Brooks were Woody Allen, Neil Simon, Carl Reiner, Larry Gelbart, and Mel Tolkien. The Producers, 1967, was his directorial debut and earned him the Academy Award for Best Original Screenplay. The film barely registered on its initial release but became a genuine cult object over the years that followed, and its reputation only grew. Blazing Saddles and Young Frankenstein both arrived in 1974, and Brooks became one of the most commercially successful filmmakers working in America. High Anxiety, 1977, History of the World, Part 1, 1981, Spaceballs, 1987, and Robin Hood, Men in Tights, 1993, followed. His production company, Brooks Films, also produced serious dramatic films that repeatedly surprised people who knew him primarily as a comedian. The Elephant Man, 1980, Francis, 1982, and The Fly, 1986, among them. He is one of only a small number of entertainers in history to have achieved the EGOT, winning Emmy, Grammy, Oscar, and Tony Awards. His EGOT was completed in 2001 when his stage musical adaptation of The Producers swept the Broadway season, setting a record with 12 Tony wins in a single night, a record that still stands. Brooks was married to actress Anne Bancroft from 1964 until her death from uterine cancer in 2005. Their bond was, by every account, one of the great creative and romantic partnerships in modern show business. He has one son with Bancroft, screenwriter Max Brooks, best known for the novel World War Z. His memoir, All About Me, My Remarkable Life in Show Business, was published in 2021 to enormous warmth from readers and critics alike. His lifelong comedy partner Carl Reiner, with whom he recorded the beloved 2,000-Year-Old Man comedy albums, died in June 2020 at the age of 98. In 2026, Mel Brooks turns 100 years old on June 28th. He is the last surviving principal cast member of Blazing Saddles, the man who put the whole thing together, who fought to get it made the way he wanted it made, who was told it was too much and made it anyway. Still here to see how it turned out. Cast member 2, Burton Gilliam, Lyle. Burton Gilliam played Lyle, the enthusiastic and cheerfully dim-witted henchman who rides alongside Taggart and delivers some of the film's most quotable moments with wide-eyed, sun-baked conviction. He had only a handful of scenes, but he played them with such committed energy that he became one of the most instantly recognizable faces in the film. Burton Gilliam was born on November 2, 1938, in Floydada, Texas, a flat, windswept panhandle town about 60 miles northeast of Lubbock. His accent was not studied, his drawl was not trained. He grew up with both. Before acting entered his life, he worked for years as a fireman in Dallas, a detail he has always mentioned with evident pride. His screen debut came in Peter Bogdanovich's Paper Moon, 1973, a film that also launched Madeline Kahn's career. Blazing Saddles followed the next year, and Gilliam spent the rest of the 1970s and 1980s as a reliable character presence in westerns and comedies. He appeared in Benji, 1974, Honeysuckle Rose, 1980, with Willie Nelson, Uphill All the Way, 1986, and Back to the Future Part 3, 1990, where he played a member of Buford Mad Dog Tannen's gang, a role that felt almost like a continuation of Lyle, relocated to 1885 Hill Valley. In 2026, Burton Gilliam is 87 years old and one of the very few surviving members of the principal Blazing Saddles cast. He has remained active at fan conventions for years, attending events where the film is celebrated, signing memorabilia with a wide grin, and talking about what it was like to be on that set, about working alongside Slim Pickens, who was the real thing, about Mel Brooks, who created an atmosphere where you felt free to be as funny as you possibly could, and about a film that keeps finding new audiences more than 50 years after they shot it. Not many people get to say that about something they were part of. Burton Gilliam can. Cast member 1, David Huddleston, Olson Johnson. David Huddleston played Olson Johnson, one of the Rock Ridge townspeople, a pompous, indignant member of the local establishment who greets every outrage with maximum sputtering self-importance and absolutely zero self-awareness. It was the kind of supporting role that Huddleston spent his career perfecting, the blustering authority figure who exists to be punctured. David Huddleston was born on September 17, 1930, in Vinton, Virginia. He trained at the American Academy of Dramatic Arts and served in the U.S. Air Force before beginning an acting career that would span more than 5 decades. He made his film debut in a small role in A Lovely Way to Die, 1968, and spent the following decades building a quietly remarkable resume in both film and television. On television, he appeared in Gunsmoke, McCloud, The Rockford Files, Macmillan and Wife, and Santa Barbara, among dozens of other programs. He had a starring role in the short-lived NBC Western series Heck Ramsey, 1972 to 1974, alongside Richard Boone. On film, his most celebrated later role came in the Coen brothers' The Big Lebowski, 1998, where he played the original Jeffrey Lebowski, the wheelchair-bound millionaire whose stolen rug sets the entire plot in motion. The film became a cult phenomenon of enormous proportions, and Huddleston's imperious performance in it introduced him to a generation who had never seen Blazing Saddles. He also appeared in Frantic, 1988, Roman Polanski's thriller with Harrison Ford, and continued working into the 2000s. His final screen credit was a guest appearance on Boston Legal in 2005. David Huddleston died on August 2, 2016, in Santa Fe, New Mexico, from heart and kidney disease. He was 85. His wife Lili died just 4 days later, on August 6, 2016. They had been married for 45 years. Bringing it together. Who's still alive in 2026? Of the 10 principal cast members covered in this video, only 2 are still with us in 2026. Mel Brooks turns 100 years old on June 28, 2026, an astonishing milestone for a man who has been making people laugh since the days of Sid Caesar and Your Show of Shows. He remains the last surviving member of the film's principal cast, the last link to the production itself, and one of the last living figures of a particular era of American comedy that simply will not be repeated. He has outlived nearly every collaborator, friend, and co-star from the most creative period of his life. That he carries it with evident humor rather than grief says everything about who he is. Burton Gilliam, who played Lyle, is 87 years old in 2026. He is still attending fan events, still talking about the film, still representing the Texas Panhandle with the same energy he brought to the screen in 1974. Everyone else is gone, and gone in most cases far too early. Cleavon Little died at 53, Madeline Kahn at 57, Slim Pickens at 64, Dom DeLuise at 75, Harvey Korman at 81, Alex Karras at 77, Gene Wilder at 83, David Huddleston at 85. What They Left Behind is a film that has outlasted nearly all of them by decades. Still funny, still sharp, still the most quoted Western comedy ever made. The people who created it were, as a group, some of the most talented comic performers of the 20th century. Most of them only got to see a fraction of how much it mattered. Blazing Saddles was made for $2.6 million and became one of the most beloved comedies ever put on film. The people who made it were as varied a group as you could assemble: a Broadway-trained Tony winner, a quietly devastated widower, an Oscar-nominated opera singer, a television institution, a genuine rodeo cowboy, a professional football player, a fireman from Floydada, Texas, a courtly Virginia character actor, a Brooklyn filmmaker who refused to believe any subject was beyond the reach of the right joke, and a Brooklyn comedian who was the funniest man his best friend had ever known. Most of them are gone. The film isn't going anywhere. If this brought back some memories, hit the like button and subscribe. There are more stories like this one waiting for you.